but we do have to get to news.
Yeah.
So we have some updates for you guys on the Golden State Killer, a.k.a. the East Area Rapist. He is going to be in court today. He's being arraigned on murder charges. We know that he's had, 12 murders, 50 rapes, and over 120 burglaries.
Right. Accused of.
Of course.
Formally charged today,
Exactly.
likely in court.
And so what we know is that they were able to get the information about him through a DNA Ancestry website, linking DNA from one of his family members to him and then reaching out to him for more information. So there will definitely be more questions to come for this one, because I want to know how they got tipped off in the first place.
Right.
How they legally can access that DNA information from a database belonging to that company when he didn't give his access. So I am not sure how all of this is legally working out.
Okay, so remember the big unveiling of the arrest and everybody connected to this. All the county's district attorneys, some of which started their careers in law enforcement as this was their first case. So it was quite a moment in California law enforcement history as they sort of told their story and their connections to this case. But remember, as they pointed out in the beginning, the district attorney for this county started this task force to basically look at this again with a combined effort to go through everything that they know and work on new leads and to basically keep it going, keep the investigation going, not assuming that it's a cold case and it's not worth investigating. So she pointed out in the very beginning that that's why they were all there, is that they had been working on this for a while. So if you are a district attorney and your job is to prosecute these big crimes and to bring charges.
And this is a huge...
Exactly. I would consider all of them legal experts at the top of their game, and whatever they may not be 100% on, there's people in all of their county offices that are up on this. So as the layman, we start questioning these things. Hey, can you do that? Can you do this?
Right.
I mean, there's California law enforcement. I believe 10 counties are involved. And you've got to assume that as they're going through this process, they cannot let this case slip away on a technicality. So I'm sure as they're getting closer and things are starting to get really hot on this individual's trail, that they've got to be going through legally. Can we? Should we? Will we? So in my mind, for the people that are concerned, oh no, what if they can't do this? And this goes away via technicality, because these things have happened in the past.
There's no precedence for something like this.
Exactly. I've got to assume that legally they have everything lined up for these questions that the public is asking, and ultimately in court that the defense will be asking.
You would hope, because I was just talking to Walt Gray about this before we got on.
Yeah, because he's headed that way.
He is headed that way to the prison to try and get an interview with this gentleman right here. And so we were talking, and I said, you know what? If it comes out that they were able to acquire this DNA sample and make these connections off of evidence that was improperly achieved or obtained, there's going to be hell to pay for this.
I say, however, in a crime like this, I'm like, however you needed to get it, you get it. And I know I'm in the minority with that, but that's just like that kind of crime. Do what you have to do.
A lot of people feel that way, but in the court of law, you can't get away with it.
So let's talk about the feeling, the gut feeling. Okay. Now, we were not here when these crimes happened.
No.
We weren't even really alive when these happened. Many of us, right?
Also accurate.
Okay. So, but we live here, and we've been watching the interviews.
in our community.
Yeah, and
that's
exactly.
So crazy.
Exactly. So the suspect caught here, close to where a lot of us live.
Citrus Heights. Yeah.
Right. So even though we're not there when it happened, we live in the area. It's somehow connected. Okay. So, the point of all this is that as these details start coming out, right now this person is accused, arrested.
Correct.
Today is the charging motion. We're going to learn more and more about how this has all come together. But I think that some of these base questions are really worth exploring. And that when I read it, I'm telling you, yesterday was an extremely busy day for me. But for 5 seconds, because I'm so interested in this, I checked to see what was going on. And when it was revealed that this may have been run through private, commercial Ancestry sites, of which we've been inundated everywhere.
Yes.
Some of the ones, and we don't know how this was done, but some of the ones that we know, people voluntarily take a swab, and they send it off, and they get a DNA sample. Mostly people want to know their heritage.
That's it.
But apparently the genetics these days are so good that you can get loose matches via your family.
They send you pages of people who could be connected to you.
And those people often, share this information with potential family members, because that's the other thing. Let me just tell you a side story.
Please.
My dad was adopted from Canada. And so he's had this lifelong journey of just trying to figure that out. And so this was way back in the day. He found this service that reached out, that basically traced things back, not via DNA, but just through public records and various ways of just trying to find things out. Remember, he's in the United States. This all happened in Canada. And basically, he tried to reach out. They found a match. They found his mom. And so then they were the in-between, the arbitrator. So he had a letter, photograph saying, I would like to meet you someday if that's okay, but this is where I am. There's no ill feelings. I just want to let you know I'm okay. She wrote back, hey, this was a long time ago. Here's a photo. I cannot, my health is poor. I cannot meet you, but I'm happy that you're doing well. So that, for my dad, that was a conclusion. But you can see, for all of us, not thinking about things like this, there's a need, a desire, a passion to know more about your family history. Because I will tell you something right now. We think we know our family history, but we don't know all the stories. Every family's complicated. There's things going on that people weren't talking about or did not talk about then and don't want to talk about now. So these private services are answering family questions, I think, in a very healing way.
Yep, I agree.
That's the positive intent.
Health too. They address health issues. A lot of people need to know their health.
Yeah, and that was one of my dad's primary concerns, because on one side, on both sides, on his mom and his dad, he doesn't know the family history.
Of course.
So he doesn't know if he's at higher risk for cancer, heart disease, and all these other things. So wanting to know your family's history is it starts from a positive place.
Right.
So as we're learning more, but now there's this other angle, and I'm curious to know what you guys think about this, because hearing this, that what we know so far is that some family member, we don't know how, whatever, but they call it familial DNA.
Correct.
Somewhere in the family tree, one of these private institutions, and we don't know which one, and this is what they are saying, the investigators are saying, is that through that system, with his DNA, they were able to make a match.
Correct.
So inadvertently, someone may have contributed data, a piece of the puzzle, that then led them to this individual where they made a match. So my question, especially with the comments, it all comes down to the comments.
It does, and they are commenting about this.
Knowing that, I think we can all agree that how this all came together, we're a little bit murky on. The lawyers are going to hash this stuff out. But this is the result. If this is the individual and they're able to prove this out, this is clearly a positive result of maybe this murky process. But with that said, are we more concerned? Do we have any hesitation whatsoever about volunteering to submit a DNA sample that may end up being involved in some sort of legal case?
Absolutely, but what people are saying here in the comments, we've got a mix, so I want to cover a lot of what you guys are saying. Some people have said, David Wong, it does change his opinion about genealogy sites. He thought it was so weird that they could determine anyone and what their heritage is with just 23% of their DNA. And it seems that they do know what they're talking about. So he is uncomfortable with this. But other people are saying that if you didn't commit a crime, here we go. Joanne Marie Heinz, not when there is nothing to worry about. If you're not a criminal, you don't have to worry about giving your DNA over. But with cloning, I know this sounds crazy, but I like to think about the crazy things.
That's a good, I never look at this angle.
We're getting so close. People can be cloned.
Yeah,
they're cloning pets right now. If you have my DNA, who knows what you're going to do with that DNA? Who knows who you could sell it to on the black market?
Oh gosh, I didn't think of that. I don't know.
I don't know where this information is saved on your server and who can access it from black channels. I don't know.
Right.
But I don't want to mess with it.
Right. Things that we all thought were safe. Social security numbers, credit cards,
Facebook,
your general profile. There's a hacking story every day. So it's not unwise to assume that it could be hacked and that your DNA blueprint could be out in the open. That's not a crazy, a wild assumption that it could happen.
Okay, so Ashley Belcher is saying the military collects the DNA of all of the military personnel. So that's 2% of the population that is involved in the government that they're already keeping track of. What's to say they couldn't keep track of more? I don't need the government knowing my DNA.
Right.
Not that I did anything wrong. I'm an angel, but
Right.
still.
But there are laws in the books. If you get picked up and booked, not even convicted of a felony, that they can take a DNA sample and put it in the system.
What's weird to me is that he was a cop for 3 years before he was fired. And I would believe that they would have all the DNA of the cops that they have.
That's a good question. That's a good
no.
point that they
don't.
He was a cop in the 70s.
They didn't have that, did they?
Exactly. I mean, let's go. Let's think about the 70s, you guys. I mean, like color TVs were like, oh my gosh.
True.
Okay, I'm off by a decade or so on that realization, but it's still relatively new for the general population. I'll put it that way. So it was just a different era.
Yeah.
And so a lot of things, for example, as investigators and journalists are going back to look at the records, did this individual work at, just trying to nail down, did he work for the Auburn Police Department? Did he work for a town outside of Visalia, I believe, called Exeter? Did he work there? That police department doesn't even have physical pay stub records.
Because it was so long ago?
Right. And then people were chiming in saying, oh, well, of course they do. They go back 30 years. Well, this is more than 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So some of these records just aren't retained forever. So even pinning down physical evidence that somebody worked somewhere over time, they don't necessarily have it.
That's tough.
Even looking at his picture makes me sick. Like, it makes me ill. It makes me angry. And I think about his neighborhood. You're saying, oh, this is a safe neighborhood. Nothing's going to happen. Okay, well, you have a monster in your neighborhood. And it could happen to any of us. And it's a good reminder to our children. If it feels icky, it is icky. So if someone's giving you those vibes, you need to stay away.
And some of those families nearby, they said, I just was not I was not comfortable. And as sad as it was, because my young daughters, and I'm recounting reports that I have read. Okay, I'm not just making this stuff up.
Oh,
so
you're well informed.
I just can't pin it to the individual reporter because I just don't know right now.
Right.
But they have gone to the neighborhood and asked the neighbors, and they said, yeah, I felt bad about it, but I did not feel comfortable with my daughter playing with this man's daughter because not because of them, but because of him. There was just something a little weird there.
Okay, I don't know this to be true. That is exactly what I'm seeing. I need somebody in our comments to fact check this man and to see if this is true. James Melvin is saying that DNA is taken on all newborns after 2008. Did you remember this?
Born in 2007. So I don't know.
Okay, so I will tell you, in the hospital, they do like a little prick, and then they run a very loose test for a wide number of generic genetic things that may pop up. It's one of the procedures. I don't know if it's voluntary or not. I really don't know that. I know that it happened with both my kids, and they never asked me, but I just figured it was procedure. Just like before you leave, there's a hearing test. They physically check out the baby. Maybe that's just the hospital's rules, is we want to make sure. We want to make sure before you leave that everything's okay, because then if and I don't know this, but it's possible to me, for their rules of allowing you to leave, that they themselves, to protect themselves, have made sure that that this baby has everything functioning before they let the baby out, because let's just say perhaps they didn't go through the things that they know could be a potential problem, and then they let you go and there's a problem later on, then that family could say, hey, you knew that this could be a problem, yet you never checked for it before we left. So, in a roundabout way, maybe some of these things might be done just internally for them to know that the baby is safe to go home. But we need to fact check that, because let's be honest, we don't know the answer to that here on this panel. We don't.
Mystery Metri, at least that's what she calls herself here, says that DNA sites state that you can request to have your DNA destroyed after it's used, and that if that is true, you can use it for ancestry purposes. In the policies that she has read, they are prohibited from selling or releasing your DNA to the government. She says that it feels like this is a violation of that policy, if that is how this happened.
Okay.
Someone could have committed a crime, right? Is that correct, or am I not with that, and that's how they got it? Someone else could have committed a crime?
Well, we don't know.
But that could be a way that it happened.
The assumption a couple days ago was that we know that if someone is arrested on a crime, not even convicted, and it's a felony, that they can collect DNA and it's in the system. So we know that. What came out yesterday is something that I think was all new to us, is that law enforcement was able to run this sample.
Right.
What I'm curious about the most, and again, I'm assuming that legally they've gone through everything.
Fingers crossed.
But, when you hear the language of the press conference the other day, they were saying this is cutting edge.
Right.
This is the forefront of what we're doing, and we just as a base understanding with terms of service.
Right.
And actually, I believe it was 23andMe came out and said no. We don't work with law enforcement on this unless there's a subpoena involved. So if that was the case, then publicly at some point we should be able to see the subpoena. If there was no subpoena, well, now you have a number of interesting scenarios that may have played out. And again, we're just speculating here for the sake of conversation, okay? And remember, I'm the weather guy.
Being clear. We're being clear with you guys. We're having a conversation about this because at this point we've told you everything we know, so we're on a level playing field, and we can actually have
a conversation about it.
Exactly, a little chat about it.
These are things that we want to know. We want to know these things because we have a curiosity, and then we want to know ultimately down the road, how does this affect us?
Exactly.
Right? Because if this is a new frontier that we're not aware of, we should know that information before we voluntarily submit DNA to a company.
Exactly.
That may, whether it's voluntarily given to law enforcement or involuntarily via subpoena.
Right.
Or perhaps there's some other working agreement where it doesn't identify your individual DNA, does not identify you as an individual, but say
like
a portion of your DNA. So it's loose enough as to not pinpoint the individual, but could put your DNA somewhere on a family tree or lineage. I mean, these are all interesting things. But my most curious question is, is it possible that somebody in law enforcement submitted this man's DNA to run a familial check? Maybe on one of them, maybe on two of them, maybe on three of them.
You never know.
Just to see what would come back. And that's what's most curious to me, because they say in their paperwork, right, from what I've read, is that you're not allowed to submit DNA on the behalf of somebody else.
This is, okay, so Jessica Downey is chiming in on that one, and she says, she asked a question, and it's a good question, and we've talked about it here too. Is it possible the family members had suspicions and voluntarily gave their DNA that they received from the site to law enforcement? 100% possible. We have no idea if that's what happened, but that is what sounds most plausible to me.
Can I say this?
Yeah.
I am like, this is how I feel about it for like murders and rapes. I'm like, I hope this sends a clear message that you might think you can get away with it, but we have bigger ways, a bigger net to catch you. And that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, all right, well, we have a bigger net now, and hopefully maybe that could drive the numbers down. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that?
Well, you know, for these, it was interesting because there's a lot of people that focus on these high-profile cold cases.
Yeah.
The Zodiac killer. Until a couple days ago, this individual. There was the guy in Kansas. There was the guy in Washington State, the Green River killer. And they focus on these crimes, but ultimately they are caught. And I was looking at a discussion board, and they said, who should we are passionate about this issue. Who should we focus on next? And it kind of went quiet. They said, well, there's a few, but there's not many. To prove your point is that ultimately many of these very high profile
could be solved.
Yeah,
right?
it could be solved. They can make arrests. They can make convictions. For some of these very high profile people, serial killers, etc., it's not just a conviction based on, they will stand up and confess to everything.
Right.
Like the guy in Wichita, Kansas. So, I mean, that must have been horrifying and traumatizing for the victims, but they got full closure knowing that, yes, they indeed have their person.
And
he's going to actually see some of the people that he knows in court today. So we have Kenneth Smith, who is the brother of Katie Majore, who was married to Brian. Katie and Brian were victims of this man right here. He's also going to see Loretta, who is Brian's mother, and it'll be interesting to see what their reactions are like when they see him in person. And I don't know, I can just imagine that moment. Exactly, mine too.
But maybe they have been waiting, you know, this whole time. Let me hold him accountable. Let me have that day because you are a monster and you terrorized me and my family, and I got the last word. They got the last word.
It was like when those girls were on trial for the gymnastics scandal, and the father stood up and started screaming. That was clearly just pent-up frustration and rage that he had to get out.
Both his
You never know how people are going to grieve.
Right.
You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, we can't relate to this necessarily, but we've seen it play out before in court. So it's going to be a very intense day in court today.
Oh, so we have an update. Chris from Digital just sent us an update saying that the DNA is collected at birth to check for any genetic disorders or birth defects, like you were saying. States usually discard them after the samples are tested, but they don't have to do so anymore as per the ACLU. Thank you very much, Christopher Hooks, for that information.
Always got our back.
Very helpful.
I feel like that clarifies it a little bit, but so they do collect it. They can destroy it, but they don't have to. So then I guess it's possible that maybe they collect it and hang on to it. We don't know. I mean, that part I don't know, but that's
people are saying they are fascinated by this. Betsy Moore, maybe they made a fake name or account and submitted the DNA they had as his. That is a stretch, but it could happen.
Well,
and she did
maybe
say she's
it
okay
hit with the relatives and then narrowed it down from there. What were you going to say?
Betsy also followed up, said she's okay with using any tool necessary to get folks like that. And
she's with you,
right
Brittany.
there.
Okay.
So I had to put that in.
I mean, this is fascinating on so many levels.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, we can agree as we're connecting the dots and with all the pain and misery and everything that's gone on, the fact that somebody's arrested, again, going to get formally charged today at 1:30. It's moving along, but this particular aspect of it is very, to me, is very gray until the district attorneys get up there in front of a microphone and walk us through the process.
Yep.
But remember, their obligation is not necessarily to the media or to individuals.
No, not to us at all.
They may have to walk it through in court, because if I were part of the defense, I would say, wait a second, because your whole goal is to try and, any evidence that is linking your client, you have to challenge all of that.
Correct.
As part of due process to make sure that your client has a fair trial, so that everybody can realize we went through the whole process, we looked under every rock, we tried to look at everything to make sure that this was done the right way, so we have a conviction that everybody can agree on.
People are just still shocked coming in. They found him, but it took 40 years. Thanks to DNA, hopefully we'll catch these people sooner. Just reading some of your comments as they came in. Kelly Catherine Sullivan, again, to think that the websites are the only people that have these technologies and have access to these databases is foolish. They very probably use their own labs or resources. We don't know.
I would say when they say they picked up the discarded DNA, I'm sure that they use their own labs.
Okay.
Right, because they would because here
they could process
right,
that.
Exactly. Okay, so gosh, I feel like I'm going back to this whole OJ thing, because it was a TV series and a documentary.
This will definitely be a TV series.
So what they tried to do with OJ is the chain of custody is very important in collecting evidence. In other words, for OJ, we found the glove here. It went to this individual here. It was stored at this location here. In other words, they need to prove that it was contained, not contaminated or tampered with from beginning to end.
Sure they did.
Yeah,
it's hard to do.
So I can almost guarantee in that process of collecting his DNA, right, to match it with what they have before. One, collecting the DNA at the scene of the crime, they would have to show chain of custody for that, so they have that. This is the DNA we collected at the crime, but we don't know who it is. That's step one. Step two, they collect it, and then they have to prove, it was this discarded DNA. It went in this patrol car. It went to this lab. So that part of it, I believe, would all be in-house.
And I hope that because you were referencing data from 30, 40 years ago, that they still have the ability to track down that information.
Right.
I feel like that's tough. I've watched plenty of SVU episodes to know.
I love them.
But
things get lost in the shuffle.
But remember, it's not just convictions. It's convictions that are overturned these days based on DNA that's just as old.
Right.
So if they feel confident enough to convict people on it, maybe, and they're confident enough to overturn convictions, which they never ever, the resistance to doing something like that is massive, both internally, for so many different reasons, but it does reach that barrier of proof, old DNA used to exonerate people.
Okay, so
thanks for watching us here on the ABC 10 Information Network. If you want to see more stories just like this one, click subscribe.